r/AskReddit by Reddit and chill. Professors that have been offered sexual favors by students or students that have offered sexual favors to professors. What happened? My brother is a professor at a large state school. He was propositioned so many times by students that he and the other 3 professors in their office suite agreed to arrange their office hours so that none of them would ever have to be alone with a student, female or male. Seriously. One of the best pieces of advice I ever received was from my MS advisor. He said that if it was at all avoidable to never, ever, be anywhere alone with a student, especially in your office, if you had to be for some reason, always leave the door open and sit so that the student could get to the door without going by you. Dude was great for a lot of reasons, but had heard too many horror stories from male and female colleagues about advances and threats from students. Sit so that the student could get to the door without going by you. Duck. Why didn't I think of that one? I'll have to use that. I'm a young male teacher. This whole thread is straight out of a nightmare for me. If you're ever in a situation where you're managing people and coaching someone one-on-one, you should remember to do the same thing. You never want your position or posture to imply that the person cannot get away. Adjunct in engineering here. Male. Very few female students. Only once. One of them began trying to negotiate a better grade and put out escalating hints that a BJ was on the table. I just smiled, wished her a good day, and kept my boner under the table. So the BJ went from being on the table to under the table? She negotiated him under the table. The negotiations were short. It actually happened when I was teaching finance. The young lady asked if there were any non-academic ways to raise her grades, and suggested there were few places she was unwilling to go. I used it as a teaching moment. I suggested that she get a study partner, sign up for tutoring and learn how to do the work. I told her offering up sex for grades would destroy her confidence and self-esteem, but working for and earning her grade would help her for the rest of her life. She earned a B. Good for you and good for her. This is wholesome. I used it as a teaching moment. If I ever become a professor, I hope to be as cool and detached as you in that situation. I'm dying right now. Edit. OMG, dying from laughter. Sorry if someone took this the wrong way. I have a full hopefully attached life ahead of me. If you're dying right now, I have bad news about the becoming a professor thing. Edit. I knew what you meant. LOL. A professor from my university walked into his office to a completely naked freshman girl standing in there with a 6-pack of beer. I don't think she was looking for a better grade or anything, was just attracted to him. He noped right the duck out of there. Edit. For the love of God. People, I don't know what kind of beer it was. Works 2 out of 3 times. What pose did you go with? I went with I have boobs. And she nailed it. Short story from someone I used to know. She was struggling in her astronomy class and went into office hours for the professor. She kept making hints and using body language to signal she was DTF. But apparently the prof just kept slowly moving the picture of his family on his desk further towards her until she left. I guess you can say that she eventually puts on shades. Got the picture? Yeah. Edit. Great. My most upvoted comment is one word, and it's a CSI Miami reference. Thanks a lot, Reddit. Damn. That's a smart play. I was teaching an astronomy class in graduate school when the girlfriend of one of my roommates, both undergrads, offered to orally pleasure me for a B, and the roommate was okay with that. I passed on the offer. I like to think they had a conversation and a negotiation before presenting you the offer. I bet he would totally give me an A if I ducked him out of the question. Well, I don't really need an A. I just need a passing grade. Maybe he will pass me if I blow him. Nah, you give great head. That has to be worth a B. I like to think about the conversation that happened afterward. Your girlfriend offered to blow me for a B. Yep, and she told me you said number. Of course. I would never do that to a friend. So what? She's not good enough for you, you son of a bitch. Good on you. But do you ever wonder, what if? Happened when I taught in grad school. After I had collected the final exam for the semester, one of the most quiet students in the class started chatting me up as I locked up the room. We walked to the library from there and just made small talk. She seemed nice enough, but as I got to the library and put my stuff down, I told her that I needed some privacy to finish grading exams. She straight up tells me that she thinks I'm attractive and would like to hang out. She's bold because we're on the quiet floor of the library and it's packed since it's around finals time. Not wanting to be an ass and a little shocked, I say sure and give her my number. Long story less long. I tell her we can't hang out until after grades were posted. She aced the class. Didn't need any help from me to do it. Before we could even make it to her first date, we ended up hooking up in my car a few weeks after the semester was over. Told me that she was attracted to me from the very beginning of the semester and worked up the courage to ask me out after the final. Kudos to her. Happened when I taught in grad school. Read this as grade school and thought Jesus Christ as I finished the rest of the story. I need to read more closely. Why don't you have a seat right over there? This is the right way to do it for both sides. If you're teaching, you can't ethically bang a student. If you're the student, you can't ethically force your teacher to make that call. She was upfront with her interest and patient enough to wait until you could act on it. You were calm enough to set boundaries and professional enough to hold off until it wouldn't be a professional issue. School excursion. 12th grade, Germany. Most were around 18 by then. That one girl told us that she's about to get a grade up by ducking the teacher who was with us and went over to his room. 5 minutes later, that teacher came knocking on our door. The room where most of us were just having a small party, drinking and smoking pot. And we all panicked. After about 10 seconds we had hidden most of the harder stuff and opened the door to see our teacher entering with a bottle of whiskey in his hand. No booze here? I thought you were having a party. After 15 minutes and about a quarter of that bottle, he left us again and told us to have an eye on that girl, because she will surely not be happy with the grade he will give her, and that trying to duck him wouldn't make it any better. It took us a long while to understand that he came over to make sure we all learn about that story and give him an alibi. Smart. Yep, but what did he do with the other 3 minutes? This guy ducks students. I remember asking my history teacher to bang for better grades. Sadly she wasn't down for it and neither were my classmates. I have more homeschooled stories if anyone's interested. Whips out titties. Dude just keeps on talking. Sad trombone. If tits worked like dongs, they would slowly shrink and sag to an awkward semblance of their former selves. Balloon deflating noise. I know my mom banged a professor in college. Ta-da. Here I am. Right on. My man. Looking good. Not me, but a professor friend of mine. Was older guy in late 40s teaching a business MBA class. Student in her late 30s gives him a card after exam grades were in saying she has liked him all semester and would like to go out with him. That was like 11 years ago. They have been happily married for 9 years now. That's pretty wholesome. Also professional. I see nothing wrong with asking out a professor after the semester is over, assuming you don't need to take any additional classes with them. Important to note that this is a 40-year-old and someone in their late 30s, and not a high school student. Then it's wholesome. Edit. Just saying this because the title of the thread implied a negative act. This is just a nice story about two adults. My kindergarten teacher just didn't understand this. Back in high school I saw a girl I knew walking around drunk in the middle of a shopping center, so I offered her a ride home. We had a math class together and she asked me if I thought our teacher was weird. I didn't think he was. She then told me how he lent her lunch money one day and to pay him back she tried to duck him. But he turned her down. For something as little as lunch money. It shook her that he turned her down. I then had to turn her down in exchange for the ride home. Now she probably thinks I'm weird. That sounds like the girl went through some traumatizing shit. Definitely. I heard multiple stories of her being abused, so I think she just expected it. That's some sad shit. Not quite the same, but 13 years ago, whilst I was teaching at university, I ogled a girl after finding out she was into Stargate. A month later I was teaching her. A year later, when I wasn't teaching her, we met at a party and ended up hooking up. We've been together for almost 12 years, married 5, and have a son. Whoa, this took a turn. I'd love to be able to meet the cast and writers, producers, directors of Stargate SG-1 to thank them, as in some way, they are responsible. I ogled a girl after finding out she was into Stargate. Let's be honest, this is one of the best reasons on earth to ogle a girl. My friend is an adjunct professor of psychology and very gay. He would tell me of at least 3 freshman girls a year who would offer to do anything for a better grade. He would recommend better studying habits. Well yeah, if he's, edit, very gay and they still offer, they obviously didn't study him very much. Not to me, but to my father. He was having a meeting with a student in his lab, and his colleague was working across the room. The student was coming on hard to him and he was doing his absent-minded professor thing and didn't really notice what she was up to. The colleague was apparently just killing himself at my dad's refusal to notice what was going on. He, the colleague, proceeded to tell that story at most every faculty party, which is how I heard it. I saw this happen to my own dad. I was back in town for Christmas after a few years overseas, and dropped by his lab to walk him to lunch. The second I gave him a hug, I saw one of his postdocs looking absolute daggers at me. The second he introduced me as his daughter, the color rushed back into her face and she was so happy she nearly hugged me herself. Later I asked him about her, and he just gave me an absent-minded look and said something about her being a nice girl. Worries about me, always making sure I eat lunch. Dad's a long-time widower, so there wasn't any animosity on my part, just hilarity. He's also pretty far along the autism spectrum, so if she really wants him she'll have to dial it up a bit. No shit. I actually had to tell my DH that I wouldn't say no if he were to ask me to be his girlfriend. Dude was oblivious. I'm not even autistic, I think, and I would still think that's some kind of trap. My dad asked my mom out literally the day after he taught her the final class of the semester. They've been married for 28 years. Edit. I guess I should clarify that my mom was 23 or so and my dad is 10 years older than her. They've always felt like they had a pretty normal, boring relationship to me. Lots of couples meet in strange ways, and I don't think the way they met affected their long-term relationship in any significant way. You know what's kept them together all those years? Super kinky student-teacher roleplay. Imagine it. You monster. : That's so degrading. Guy here. Had an English lit professor who had a crush on me. She actually gave me a lap dance at a popular bar near the university one night and said, if you didn't have a girlfriend, the things I would do to you. Not mentioning she was married. She even wrote an email one time. Had we but whirled enough in time. Looking back, I think she had some issues. The real favors she did were writing me letters of recommendation and setting me up with this girl in our class. We were together for 3 years. How did she end up giving you a lap dance? There has to be a juicy story there. The professors from our department would sometimes go out to the bar for a drink with us. One night they stayed longer than usual and she got hammered. She had an obvious crush for a while. I mean, even back then, sending suggestive emails was not a smart idea for a professor, even if they were oddly Victorian romantic. But looking back I realize that woman's body was screaming for babies. She moved away after that to teach at a very conservative university that forbids professor-student fraternizing. And she had a baby. University that forbids professor-student fraternizing. There are some that don't. I had an English professor that would make every class write an essay on whether or not it was morally okay for a college professor to date a student. The hot girls that said they were okay with it, he'd ask them out. That seems like it might attract attention from higher up, being a yearly thing. Hide in plain sight. It's so overt, it's covert. I was an adjunct instructor at a small, regional college and a female student had tried multiple times to get on my good side for a better grade. First she brought in donuts, then pizza, and finally one day she stayed late after class and suggestively asked if there were other ways she could improve her grades. Being a socially inept male, it took a little bit for that to sink in, but once I got the idea I kindly asked her to leave. She did and I thought that was that, except it wasn't. Turns out she reported me for sexual harassment. Nothing ever came of it however, since she ended up getting into trouble. Drugs I think, and dropped out of school. Even still, it was a very scary moment for me and factored into my decision to leave teaching and pick a different career. That's why, as the adult or person in power, you should always report things like this right away. That way if she tries to say otherwise, there's already something said on your part. I'm so shocked as to how many creepy close calls have made people make major life-changing decisions. I'm sorry one little scorn beach ruined teaching for you. That's horrible. My dad was my mom's statistics professor in college. So I guess I happened. Me and my brother constantly give her shit for getting an easy A. She got the D. Your dad got some easy A. I was the network admin at a 3,500 student university and had a girl ask me a couple of obviously leading questions about how the grading software worked and if I had access to it. I did, but changes were audited. Then lean in close to whisper in my ear, being careful to drag her breast against my arm as she did so. That she would do. ONYTHING. I wanted if I would give her a B in a class she needed to graduate that spring. I also had an aunt offer me what she thought was the amazingly large sum of $500 if I would fabricate a complete degree for the son of some church friend of hers. The amazing thing is that 2 professors and 1 academic support staff lost their jobs trying to do the same sort of thing for students while I was there. ONYTHING. Except study. Hey man. Studying for a semester can take like 100 hours total. Meanwhile sex with OP would only be like 3 minutes. If sex with OP takes 3 minutes and gets her a B, in 100 hours they could have sex 2,000 times and she could have 2,000 Bs. That's an entire swarm. And she could easily start a career as a beekeeper. In grad school, they paid for all my expenses in exchange for me to teach public speaking to undergrads. I was technically a T, but I was the sole teacher in the classroom and the only one to do the grading, lecturing, etc. I was also only 4 years older than most of my students, so I was prepared for lots of inappropriate comments and suggestions. Surprisingly, though, most of my students treated me with utmost respect, except, of course, for a few of them. When a kid didn't show to classes the first 4 weeks of the semester, and he'd already missed drop deadline, I wrote him a final email telling him he'd failed and could still withdraw. The next day, I met him for the first time coming out of my office. He tried to follow me home, telling me he'd love to show me his oral presentation skills. That I'd know he doesn't have to take the class once I see what this tongue can do. Instead of walking home, I walked him over to the dean's office and left him there to negotiate, telling him another T might pick him up, but if he comes within 50 feet of me again I'd have to call security. Holy shit, that sounds traumatic. Luckily I was so stressed out by grad school that the gravity of it didn't hit for a while. I laughed it off at the time. It wasn't until a year later when I told that as a cocktail story and somebody was like, yeah, that's ducked up, that it really hit me that I was maybe in danger. Make out W a person at a dance party. 4 days later I walk into my new semester class. She was the professor. We were both a little surprised. Nissi. Not on topic, but Richard Feynman, famous physicist and Nobel Prize winner, tells the story of returning to teach college after the Manhattan Project. War was just over. He was still young enough, he was about the same age as some GIs just discharged from the army and returning to college. He went to some dance, and he would dance with the girls and chat while dancing. After one dance, they'd just walk away. Took him a while to figure it out. Finally, when one girl told him, "You're such a stupid liar," seems the conversation went something like this. "So what did you do in the war?" "I was working in Los Alamos on the Manhattan Project, helping build the atomic bomb." Finally one girl told him off instead of just walking away. The atomic bomb was a new wonder weapon that stopped the war dead in its tracks, and being early to mid-20s and claiming to have worked on it in 1945 was like some young guy today saying they work for the CIA. Not believable. So the next girl, he tells her all about a harrowing combat stint working his way up the Italian peninsula, and that was his tickets to getting laid. Never mentioned running into any of the girls later. I bet they were embarrassed. This is a true story. I was an assistant professor doing a postdoc. One semester there was a girl in one of my classes who came to my office hours a lot. Not super attractive but not ugly. She seemed to like me. One day she made a comment about trading grades for sex and added, "You should think about it, because people do this and I really want an A." I said, "That's nice but I'd really like to keep my job." And she replied, "But you're leaving at the end of the year anyway." I didn't know what to say and changed the subject. The whole thing was really awkward. Edit. So many people grandly claiming that assistant professor and postdoc are mutually exclusive. Jesus, I've worked in academia for 30 years. Maybe people use terminology differently in other fields. In my area, a postdoctoral position is a temporary position, usually 2 or 3 years, usually with a high teaching load, and usually carrying the title assistant professor. There are such things as postdoctoral fellowships with little or no teaching, but in my field those are quite rare. Edit 2. Ducking morons continue to tell me that my use of the word postdoc is improper. Oh, really? A postdoctoral scholar, postdoc, is an individual holding a doctoral degree who is engaged in a temporary period of mentored research and/or scholarly training for the purpose of acquiring the professional skills needed to pursue a career path of his or her choosing. Thank you. Sorry to hear the sex was so awkward. Even more awkward was he gave her a B. Female student, I would do anything for an A. Professor, how about study harder? Today I learned English lit professors are dirty AF. I think it's because they are the romantics. Edit. I'm torn wanting to show my English teacher wife my modest success, knowing that then I get to explain why I was on this post. Edit 2. I am not the English teacher. Please forgive the poor English. Not involved in the story, but the principal at my high school is married and has a kid with a woman he taught in freshman year. Edit. Looking at the replies, I guess this happens a lot. Edit 2. The same guy fired another teacher because he took one of his, the teacher, female students home after practice one day. Edit 3. Duck UU/KingRaj 4826. Ducking like and subscribe.